Hey, everybody, welcome to Beyond the Track, the 20th episode. Woo, stacking them up. Cooper Tires, thank you guys so much for being a part of this series. Today's going to be a great one. It's with Davey Coombs. Davey, welcome to the show first off. I don't even know how to intro you all the way. I feel like I could choose 5 different titles. So what do you want me to intro you with today? What are you today, right now?
I am guest number 20.
Okay. All right. Guest 20 on Beyond the Track. But I mean, Davey, there's so many things we're going to get into here. We're going to steer in and out of everything that you've been a part of going on decades now. And we'll hit some 2020 stuff for sure. In fact, let's start there. First off, again, welcome to the show. And I just want to say, as a fan, obviously I work in the industry, but I'm still a crazy psycho fan. I think like you are, like I just love this stuff. And 2020 was scary for us as a sport. And personally, I just want to say thank you for the work that you did behind the scenes. And honestly, to see the whole sport kind of come together, just put our head down and knock out this year, it just feels good as a fan and as a part of the sport to know that we did it. And again, thank you so much for everything that you did to make this year happen.
Thank you for the kind words. There were a lot of people involved. And, you know, when the challenge really began in earnest after Daytona. In fact, I was driving to Indianapolis that weekend. I was headed there and sort of the whole world went on lockdown. And it was my big sister, Carrie, you know, Caleb Russell's mom. She was the one who said, you know what, we got to get to work. Everything was shutting down, but she's like, we have to be proactive. We've got to figure out ways to be ready when we need to convince people that we can race safely. And with Tim Cotter's help, they pulled together a task force. It included Dave Prater from Feld, folks at the AMA, folks at, Amy Ritchie, all kinds of people within the industry, and also the automobile industry, car racing. And we came up with the Safe to Race task force. And while everything was just on lockdown and we didn't know if we were going to Glendale or, you know, we ended up obviously in Salt Lake City, what would that look like? We were working on putting together this plan that would be a toolkit that any event promoter involved in motorsports, whether it was something as big as Supercross or as small as a pit bike race, would be able to go to their local health officials. Because this wasn't going to be fought, you know, at the U.S. Congress level. These were going to be community decisions, and we wanted to, you know, pull all of our expertise together. And when we came out with that, that's right about the time things started to loosen up. Salt Lake City happened, the Salt Lake 7, and I'm proud to admit, I'm as much of moto geek as you still are. I watched every lap. I even watched every practice. I think I felt like I lived in Salt Lake City for a while, and
we were all in the bubble. Even the fans were in the bubble with it. It was like we were all in that thing together, man.
And it was a wonderful thing. It allowed Supercross to complete itself. It kept the teams intact, and then it was our turn. And you know, all the things that we had done, we were able to distribute to regional promoters for Loretta Lynn's, pro motocross promoters. People all over the country started using it. And things slowly opened, and they opened safely. And Daniel, we didn't want a Sturgis event. We didn't want, you know, people to come at us and say, oh, this was a super spreader. So we had all this mitigation in place. We preached wearing masks, even though the pushback from the anti-mask people, which in hindsight is 2020, just crazy to me. Because now we're all wearing masks. We have to. Whether you believe it or not, it's the thing that keeps, you know, restaurants open. It's the thing that keeps sports venues open. It's the thing that keeps gyms open. And anyway, because we had this kit, we were able to start racing again. GNCC continued. We were able to get in, you know, 8 or 9 pro motocross races, and then everything locked down again. So we, you know, just like Feld in Salt Lake City, you know, where in 22 days they thread the needle just perfectly and got a safe, compelling championship complete. We were able to do likewise, you know, albeit 3 months later or 2.5 months later, and get it across the finish line. And, you know, there was some people wanted 6 races, some people wanted 12 races. It was a struggle to find the right thing for any promoter, whether you're the NBA promoter, the NFL promoter, the NASCAR promoter. And we just got really lucky. The weather didn't help out, but I think, you know, that's the most 2020 thing that can happen is Loretta Lynn's is a mutter.
Right. Of course, right. And you're probably like fine with it. Like, hey, we ran, we did it. Like, pour down. I mean, obviously it's not what you want, but at the same time, let's take a snowstorm if we have to do it.
Yeah. But you know, we knew that we had we felt and certainly a lot of people would agree that the you know, a race team, if it doesn't go racing, it goes away. And you know, to have the Supercross series complete at 17 rounds, for us to be able to get the 9 outdoor nationals in, for MXGP in Europe to be able to complete their series with a model that I think that was patterned off where you guys were, what Feld did in Salt Lake City, you know, that was really important. And I think whether you're an MXGP team, an outdoor motocross team, a GNCC team, and certainly a Supercross team, which right now, you know, you're a month out of starting this whole thing up again. If Supercross doesn't finish, if motocross doesn't get started, there is no 2021, not as we know it.
Yeah. And that's why I said thank you.
Well, there's a lot of people that were part of that. The person who deserves the most thanks, though, I will say, is my sister Carrie. She's behind the scenes a lot, doesn't get a lot of the headlines because, you know, she prefers it that way. And I of course have the magazine and do a lot of things. But she to me is the MVP, at least for pro motocross, and Loretta Lynn's and GNCC, and also Tim Cotter, who you're very familiar with from your arena cross days.
Yeah, I swear, like, again, when it comes across on screen on television, you know, it looked like a version of what we've seen, just different with the fans. You guys had it, Supercross had it. But at the end of the day, I got caught up in the race action too. Salt Lake was such a good runoff. And I remember watching Tomac on the podium get his plate, and I'm like, we did it. We did it. And then this summer or late summer, I'm watching Paula, and I'm like, they did it. And I'll tell you what, the Paula one was scary too, because you're not knowing if it's going to happen. And just think if it didn't, we wouldn't have been able to see Jet Lawrence get his first win, which is big for the sport. Chase Sexton get his first win, move that momentum indoors. Like, the fact of when those final checkered flags flew, it was just like, did it. And the teams, I got to say, you'll know more than me, the teams all played ball pretty well. Like, you know, they're usually not the best of buddies, but they kind of all came together and said, hey, let's do this thing. And I know you dealt with that obviously more than I did, but just to see it all come together and checkered flag wave, we did it.
Yeah, well, you know, everyone wanted to be smart, responsible, but they really just wanted to go back to racing. And that involved compromise. It involved restrictions, no fan interaction. And that was all based on what the OEMs wanted. They if they were going to put their people on the road from California, Florida, Idaho, wherever, they wanted a safe environment. They knew that, you know, the value of an event might not be the same for them if there's no sponsor village or no action or whatever. But this is 2020, everything out the window. And, you know, it'll be like that probably for a little while as we transition back in. That's the reason, you know, the 17 race 2021 Supercross season really is only in 5 states. And people, you know, the schedule came out and, you know, people are like, oh, I can't believe they're not going to California. The only place you can have a race in California right now is on an Indian reservation. And there's just no other way around it. A race with that many spectators, a race that's considered a professional sport and not necessarily just outdoor recreational exercise, which, you know, you could say ride day at Glen Helen or Lake Elsinore or wherever it's a real complicated thing. And some of it, I don't want to say it's smoke and mirrors, but a lot of it is a matter of uh, perception, you know, and you know, we knew that if worst came to worst, we'd be okay with an 8-race series. But the people at Pala, the tribe that runs the casino and owns the land, they were okay with it. I don't think a lot of those casinos ever closed their doors. It's a different kind of thing. So anyway, when people see the schedule and the furthest west race is Salt Lake, they don't understand that you cannot do business right now. I don't care if you're the San Francisco 49ers. There is no place for you to have an event with more than 250 people. And
they're out of state. They're not even in their state. They had to move the whole team out of the state.
Yeah. So you know, we live in weird times, but as we saw back in June, the people who run the Supercross series are every bit as committed as the people run, you know, Loretta Lynn's, and will do what they need to do to make it work. They're creative. They're responsible with you know, what is the crown jewel of our industry, and you know, we need a good, compelling Supercross series, just like we had last year, including Salt Lake City.
Right. To kind of end that, and we'll move on into some other fun stuff. I mean, you kind of made the point. We did one city last year to close it out, and now we're going back to 6 or 7 cities. We're gonna get there. We're gonna get there. It's a transition, and the schedule looks cool to me. You know what? If you like Tomac and Cooper Webb and all these guys are on the track, I don't care. Put some cones up somewhere. I'm cool with it. I don't even care. Just let them race dirt bikes. So to your point, like, we're on our way back. But Davey, I want to talk about something where you and I have some common experience. This will be my 4th year as a trackside analyst. You were a trackside analyst, but things were so different. And I just want to know what it was like for you, because I only know what I've done. I don't know anything before the day I started. Times are different then. What was it like for you doing trackside back when things, I mean, just the guys you were working with and the way they did it structurally? Just kind of walk me through those early days, because I just want to know.
Well, thanks. That was a fun chapter, and I never intended to be a pit reporter, an announcer, or anything like that. I was at the Atlanta Supercross in 1993, and afterwards there was a national enduro about 2 hours down the road. So Todd Hicks from Fox Racing and we were driving to Gainesville because we were going to stay at Gatorback all week, and this used to be when Florida, you know, I'm sorry, the Atlanta Supercross, Gainesville National, Daytona Supercross. So we were going to do 2 weeks together in my van, and in order to pay for it, I was doing cycle news work. I was telling Sean Brennan earlier how I came up through working for Kit Palmer and Paul Carruthers and them, and they would give me the worst assignments because I would gladly go, because I lived in West Virginia. I had a van. I would go race in the morning or race the previous day. So anyway, after the race, I believe Kevin Hines may have won, but there was a wonderful gentleman there named Bob Link, who was part of the Moto World crew for a very long time. He was a cameraman from Atlanta. He came up through with Art Ekman, Scotty McLemore, the whole Loose Seals crew. Anyway, he's holding this big shoulder camera, and he's trying to interview, you know, Kevin Hines after the race. And I'm standing there with my little tape recorder watching this guy struggle with this camera. And I said, "Hey, Bob, let me help. I'll hold it." So I took the microphone and had my tape recorder standing like this, and I interviewed Kevin Hines. And then he goes, "Well, what about, it may have been Jeff Russell, my future brother-in-law." So we go over and interview him, and I've got my Cycle News tape recorder, and I've got this microphone. Well, never thought another thing of it. Went off, you know, on down to Gainesville. And about 2 months later, I get a call from a guy named Dennis Torres, who says, "Hey, are you interested in being the pit reporter this weekend at Southwick?" And I'm like, who is this? You know, this is pre-iPhone, pre-internet, all that. I don't know who this guy is. And he's like, "Yeah, I saw your tape." And I said, "What tape?" Because your audition tape. And I,
Oh, you're like, if I would have known it was an audition.
yeah, I didn't.
I was just helping a guy out.
But I was like, well, I gotta race this weekend, and I'm gonna go do a local race. He goes, we'll give you $500 and a plane ticket. And I'm like, there. So I flew to Southwick and ended up doing a feature on Doug Henry while I was there for Inside Motocross, and was the pit reporter. And when they got ready to do it the next year, they only needed me for that one race. And then the next year they called me 4 more times, the next year 10 more times. And so I was doing it through the late 90s. And it was great because I had started a newspaper, and that's what helped me to sort of open doors. They would see me on TV. It's kind of like Ralph Shaheen now with his, he's got a publication. Everyone
Speed Sport.
Yeah,
everyone knows Ralph, and he's got the Speed Sport. Yep.
Yeah, and when he calls an advertiser, they want to talk to him probably just as much to know the inside of, what does Ralph know? Where, what's the, and I kind of had that.
Hey, do you think Ralph's like the closer, right? If he's dealing with an advertiser, they're like, get Ralph on the phone and we'll close this deal. And Ralph's like, what's up? And they're like, it's a done deal. I talked to Ralph.
Yeah. Well, I think he brought our buddy Mark Carter in to help out over there. And now he's got a real closer. Mark helped us with Pro Motocross for years. Wonderful guy. Anyway, so, it really helped me because I couldn't even afford to go to those races. And so when ESPN would give me a plane ticket and, like $1,200, I would get as big a room as I could. And I'd let privateers stay in the room. I'd let other journalists. One night, Gene Newmack and Anthony Paggio stayed in my room for a couple of days when we were at Pontiac Silverdome, and it was funny and it was good times, but it was rarely live, Daniel. And what you guys do now, what we all do now, whether it's the pre-race show, the internet show, the NBC Sports Gold shows. I gotta say, you, and don't take this the wrong way. You are a really good racer, but you're a great pit reporter.
Thank you. I thought you were gonna sling an insult my way, but
no, I enjoy it immensely. And people ask me why how'd you get into that? I'm like, because I couldn't get better than 41st at a national. If I couldn't make the field, I was going to interview the guys who could. But
that's awesome.
And then it was a lot of fun. But at the same time, in this other parallel track, the magazine, we turned a magazine in 1998, started to really grow. I started a family, and by about 2004, 2005, I'd gotten to the point where I could only ask Ricky, how do you feel after a race, so many times? Because at that point, he was closing in on about 130 wins, and I was there for all of them. And after the race, it was always, Ricky, how do you feel? And
you didn't have as many guys in that podium to pull from. I got 15 dudes who could be on the podium, so for me, it's always different. Was it hard though? Just like Jeremy, Ricky, Ricky, like somebody.
It was awesome. And what's funny is, I barely knew those guys other than maybe from Loretta Lynn's or from Cycle News. And now, I worked with, Emig, Jeremy, Ricky. I was with Villapoto, last week at a pit bike race. And we just had a ball, and to now, be able to think of those guys as friends. And we all look back fondly. Eric Johnson, who's been involved with us at RacerX for many, many years. He texted me yesterday because it was the weirdest thing in his life. The first race he ever saw at High Point was a battle between Jeff Ward and Johnny O'Mara. And he was a kid from Ohio. He went down with his brother. He watched it. And now all these years later, Johnny O'Mara and Jeff Ward were at his house and they were going on a mountain bike ride. And he's like, how did my life turn out this way? He's like, these guys are my heroes. And now we hang out every day. And that's the cool thing about our industry. It's hard work. It doesn't pay well. But when it's over, you're going to miss it. And then it gets really fun.
It's crazy. I had David Bailey on Race Day Live this past year, and I don't get nervous. I don't get starstruck. But I love David Bailey. He's like my favorite. Not only because of racing, I thought he was so smooth. He was just so cool.
Yeah.
And then as a TV analyst, I felt like I was in school when I watched him. It was like you could take a notepad and a pen and just learn. He was so good. So I had him on Race Day Live, and it's like I was just weirded out. And then he at the end says, "Hey, Dan, you're doing a really good job. I love watching you on TV." And I'm like, this is so weird, because he used to, I would randomly get a good start here and there, and I'd get mentioned by you or him, whatever. Yeah. And now, like, I talk to you guys, and it's just, it is weird. It's cool, but like weird at the same time, because it's David Bailey.
Yeah, well,
David Bailey, like.
That's the deep end that they threw me into as the pit reporter, because, granted, we've had some wonderful people call the races over the years, not just Supercross, but Pro Motocross, Arena Cross. But man, I was the third wheel on that, on the gold standard was David and Art Ekman. And I got to listen to those guys every weekend. I got to go to dinner with them. I got to do post-race stuff with them, and this is back when you really just did one thing. You did the show, but I'd be doing cycle news stuff, and I'd be doing writing for the, the magazine and all these things. But I'd always stop, because it was the equivalent of, like I was the fifth Beatle, compared to those two guys. And
who cares? You're a Beatle.
Yeah. And Art Ekman was more like Ron Burgundy than anybody will ever fully realize. But one time we were in Atlanta in a hotel. I knocked on his door, and he opened it up, and he was completely naked.
Oh.
I was like, and he was just a different generation kind of guy. And he was like, "Oh, I was just getting out of the shower." And I was like, "Okay. I thought you were room service." And I was like, "Okay."
Well, I thought me and Ralph and Ricky were all close, but we're not that close. I can tell you right now, we go to lunch. It's about there, maybe a drink or two after the races, but that you went a lot. You were closer, with your guys than we all are now. I'll say that.
We didn't have so many bases to touch. We didn't have to update our Instagram. We didn't have to make a phone call. We didn't have to check our email. I mean, you didn't have any of those things when I was doing it. Hell, the helmet cam was a backpack with an actual, generator battery that you had to wear, and it weighed it was about as heavy as a brick, and no pro rider would wear it. And they figured out that I was still just almost there, and had me start doing that. And I wouldn't do a Supercross track at that point if they paid me. So I never did it in Supercross, but I could do it for outdoors, and it was a lot of fun. And then when I was done, Cameron Steele came in, and I imagine he had a pretty scary job, because Cameron just wasn't really that good on a bike, amazing in a truck, but getting him on a national track, it could be frightening at times. It was fun.
Yeah. Well, and following up again, David Bailey, it's like, it's not fair. It's like,
no.
I always bag on Ricky and say, I only had to follow you on the floor, so it wasn't that bad. And he's like, "Oh, yeah, that's just, we're hammering each other on stuff." But to follow David Bailey that's just not fair.
Next time you see Ricky, ask him this, or just make this observation. If you're around Sean Brennan or Donnie or anyone, right when you're next to him and he's not expecting it, look around and say, Ricky, between the two of us, we've got 15 major titles.
Oh, I remind him all the time, except for, see that red one back there? Uh-huh. That's my Arena Cross title that he just couldn't get. He just wasn't good enough. He just wasn't good enough to handle what that required. So I remind him all the time, and the eye roll is every time in response. So you can't crack him. He doesn't care. He can take it. But David, I gotta challenge you right now. And you already proved to me before we press record that the memory's working good. But I'm gonna challenge you right now. Back in your track pit reporting days. So I'm not going to tell you the year or the record, but I have an AMA record. And I'm on the line for a race, and you come up to me and tell me in the moment that it happened that I have an AMA record. And I feel like I do a good job on the track, and I'm like with it. But dude, for you to even come up with this record, figure it all out, and then come and tell me like within 10 minutes of it happening, I got to step my game up way, because I've never done anything like that. But do you remember the year, and do you know the record? Because you told me in my ear right before the gate dropped.
Man, I'm trying to think if it had something to do with your musical career and your racing career at the same time.
Nope.
Was it? Do you race the arena cross one night and the supercross the next?
Nope. I think
qualified
I got
for both classes 2 times in a row.
We're getting warm.
Okay.
We're getting warm.
All right. I'll never, you know, I usually stop my trivia around guys that were like in the top 100. So, what was it?
I'm affiliate. Okay. So 2002, Anaheim 2. I was the first rider in AMA history to make both mains on the same night on 4 strokes.
Oh, okay. I was close.
And you, okay. So, and I made the 250 main that night. And then 125 main, but I was on the 254 stroke. I was on a 420. I think I was on a 426. This is an 02. I can't remember, but I made that main out of the semi, and I'm on the line for the main. I'm just sitting there, and you come walking up, Daniel, you have an AMA record. And I'm like, the only guy to get in, like with the last spot, 22nd gate pick, and he said, no, first 4-stroke guy. And then the next weekend, Jeff Gibson did it the next weekend, but I beat him to it. But yeah, for you to even come up with that, like right then, I got to step it up, man. I ain't bringing that kind of game to my job.
That is a huge accomplishment. I mean, that alone and like $3.50 will get you a cup of coffee at Starbucks.
Exactly. But regardless of how big that is, big to me, all right? The whole sport turned to 4 strokes, and I proved it could be done. You're welcome, everybody.
Well, let me ask you a trivia question, and this is an easy one.
Good.
Who was the last guy to lead a supercross lap on a 2-stroke?
Lead a lap?
Lead a lap. I'll give you a hint. It was in Phoenix in 2006. And he crowned the moment on the first lap on the triple, doing a knack-knack.
Jeremy on the Honda?
Yes.
Okay, and I remember that track too. Did that have a split?
It did.
Start?
It did, and I think Chad and James and Ricky all went to the right, and Jeremy went to the left, and there was a pile up.
And had it.
And he had the herewithal, because he's the king of Supercross, and literally could do anything he wanted on a motorcycle. And he threw a knack-knack out, and I'll remember it as one of those just all-time moments. Like, I am so glad I got to see that, because no one's going to believe that years from now. You know. And
Ty Masterpool this year at Redbud.
That was one of the best moments, and I've known the Masterpools for a long time. Didn't see that coming, but when he did that, it was like a double take. Like, what? What was that? And that was. I love when stuff like that happens. It's
those are just cool. Like, you know, because he didn't do this for any reason other than I'm back. I'm winning. Yes, and Jeremy, of course, being Jeremy, is just gonna throw a big knack. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like everyone else is just all, and Jeremy's gonna go lead, throwing. I mean, just. Yeah, to see that, and again, I can't remember. I can't believe I remembered that.
Because I found out about it later. I would be remiss if I didn't tell you. He actually was pointing to his brother Jesse, who passed away 10 years.
Yep.
ago. And
that's awesome. Even more meaningful that way. Yeah.
It was just a little thing. I was impressed by that, but I was even more impressed by the fact that he just left everyone for about 20 minutes.
Yeah, and then checked out.
Yeah, it was. You know, anytime you have a moment like that, and even if it's football or, you know, basketball or something, when something that has like such big meaning, you know, Jeremy, the ultimate walk-off at Supercross is Jeremy doing that knack and literally ending the 2-stroke era. We didn't know it at the time, but if you want to put like a pin in it, that was it.
It's kind of, that was it. That was the end of that era.
You're the pin that starts.
I did.
4-stroke 2-class era.
Hey, so all you 2-stroke lover, 4-stroke haters, I'm sorry that I had to do that. Whatever. Funny joke, but let's move on. So I got to tell you a funny story as we move into Racer X. So I remember being a little kid and my dad would call like some hotline number after the race.
Oh,
He
yeah.
would write down the results and I'd sit there like waiting and he would write, someone would win with a 4-1 or whatever. And that's how we got our news. I remember waking up like, call the hotline, call the hotline. Now you have Racer X on Twitter. And the minute that Jason Wygant or Steve Mathis gets a thought, the whole world knows about it by pressing a button. Can you just like walk me through where we're at compared to what we were? I mean, it's so much different now. And it was cool then, it's cool now, it's just different. But kind of take me through that transition from calling a hotline to Steve Mathis having a thought and putting it on the internet for hundreds of thousands to see.
And that is the way, that's the currency that we pass information around with now. But Daniel, when I was 10, and this is in the 70s, there was a 614 number that the AMA did every Sunday night that you could get the results of a pro national. That is cool. But what made it the coolest thing ever is the guy at the AMA who read the results was Dave Despain. Like the living.
I never knew that. No way.
Dave Despain came out of the AMA and arguably may have been the one that coined the phrase Supercross, but that's a whole different story. But the AMA used to do a free thing, and my parents would get so mad at me because it's Sunday night. I'd wait till no one's looking. I'd run to the phone on the wall, call that number because I wanted to see if Marty Smith won or Bob Hanna won. And then in the 90s there was a guy that had a thing called 1900 INF Moto. And it was the same thing. It was a pay number, and he would read the results off from a Supercross like in a press box payphone. And it was, if you devoured numbers like I'm sure you and I both do as fans of the sport, even now, that stuff was priceless. Yeah. And then the world started to change and just became a smaller and smaller place, and suddenly you could get the results, from Europe. Suddenly there, things started, popping up on these new computers that we had at our houses. And then you could get a text telling you the results. And then you could, call someone who had a cell phone at the race. And then came iPhones, then came, social media. And now when the race ends, and let's say you're whether you're a Racer X guy or a Swap Moto guy or a Cycle News guy, you don't just go back to the hotel and write your story and send it. You got to do Twitter, you got to do Instagram, you got to do Facebook, you got to touch every one of these bases, and suddenly you're telling the same story 5 or 6 times. And it got to the point where we decided that what we needed, decided what we needed was someone to sort of be the engineer that we would send everything to, and let that person put it out. Because if you're standing there after a race, and let's say you're conducting the press conference, and let's say Justin Cooper decides to throw a donut at Jet Lawrence.
Are you predicting that? Because that might happen here in a month.
I'm just trying to think of something funny, but well, immediately you want to share that, but where are you going to share it first? And you just got to go down through your thing of like, I got to do it here, I got to do it here, I got to do it here. And by that time, you missed him throwing a half-eaten donut back. So that's the weird part now is we're long form writing like we do in the magazine, like we used to do in Cycle News, is kind of transforming and shrinking in the sense that a lot of people just don't have the appetite for something that takes more than 5 minutes to read, or it causes them to flip 2 pages because there are so many things to devour. And it used to be what you'd see on TV well after the race, or what you read in Cycle News. Now every team's got someone there on social media. Every rider, for the most part, has someone helping them out with social media. Every journalist, including announcers like yourself, you're doing stuff, whether it's for Supercross Live, for yourself, for your podcast. we're busier than we ever were, even as the audience sort of fragments itself more so than it ever was. I mean, no one, you know, we have 1 million followers on Racer X on Instagram. There was never 10,000 people who read our newspaper. And that was a month of work to get that thing, you know, produced. And now, I mean, I could take a picture of the screen and say, check out, you know, Danny Blair's jersey collection, and 10,000 people are going to see it. You know,
in like a minute. It's
and,
just fast. Everything's but now.
And you got to keep up with it. And you know, that's where we were always lucky is, you know, because I'm a huge fan of media. I wasn't just, you know, I was an English and history major in college, thought I was going to be a lawyer or even a school teacher, and may yet do that once, you know, my run in motorcycling's over in 20 or 30 years. But I always loved, in the back of the office here at Racer X, I have every motocross action, I have every dirt bike magazine, I have every modern cycle, I have every popular cycling, I have every super motocross, I have every motocross. Just, we have a library in the back, and it's because I bought those as a kid and kept them, or right. You know, archived them, and you know, I still love going back and looking at that stuff. That's why we and we use it as a resource to tell the story of supercross, motocross, off-road racing, and just the American motorcycle industry. And there's a story to be told about how the American motorcycle media has changed. And I know, you know, it's a cliche for old timers to be like, oh, you know, I remember when the Carlsbad USGP was the only race on TV every year, and they showed it 6 months later. And those guys are not exaggerating. That's the truth. And it was crazy to think how fortunate we are to be in a time where we can watch practice, qualifying, and then get with our friends at a house, a bar, anywhere, and watch live supercross. That was a pipe dream in the 90s. You know, it was like never going to happen. And so I was a part of a time when you could go live to tape, and you could go fix things if they got messed up, or if the microphones went out, or if Art didn't realize that Sebastian Tortelli wasn't lapped. You know, we could go back and fix it because it wasn't
That's
live.
Not fair.
Yeah, but it's not fair, but that's the way it was. So I think that today, and I will say that, you know, I kid, but honestly, you do a fantastic job. But I knew that when you were a kid racing, that whatever you did next was going to involve communications, whether that's because you were a musician or you just, you know, have a real enthusiasm and the ability to communicate what you're thinking. But I never thought that Ricky Carmichael did. All those times that I interviewed Ricky, he didn't give a lot, but he has evolved into a wonderful, wonderful announcer. And I also say, you know, I say this to GL, and I said it to Jeff Emig when he was doing it, that those guys got so good that I forgot that they raced.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do. I mean, it's hard to forget that the GOAT ever raced, but I already forgot that you raced.
Well, my career was a little bit easier to forget than Ricky's, but
hey, I made
again, Unicross title, Ricky, you don't have one, but you know.
I made 3 125 Supercross main events when it was just getting started out, and I knew that my next best plan, instead of sending resumes out, I needed to send letters to universities and go to college. And but I never lost my love for racing, and really wish I would have been able to go longer. But you know, I was racing at a time when those guys were so good, so much better than it seems that any, you know, kid in West Virginia or Pennsylvania could be. I say that, and then along comes Mike Jones, Brandon Justman, Brock Hepler, Travis Pastrana. So I just wasn't very good.
All right, well, let's move on to where you are very good. Again, the media journalism. I mean, I don't even know where to begin. But let's kind of talk about what you've already mentioned a little bit. I know you were doing cycle news stuff there in the beginning. You fell into the TV thing, whatever. But I want to know about Racer X and just the start of that, because now for me, Racer X is like everything. I'm obviously involved with my podcast, but it's like if I want info, I go to Racer X. It's become like just the standard of information. You got good people around. I hate to admit, Jason Wygant is very good at everything he does. I hate to admit that. But the beginning, Racer X, like where did it start and come from, like day one? Like I just want to know day one, because I know what it is now, but I don't know that first planted seed of Racer X and where it started.
I'll try and give you a Reader's Digest version. And for those of you who don't know what Reader's Digest was, it was a small magazine that condensed stories. A
lot of people don't know what that is anymore.
I know that. But I always want to say that. When I was racing as a kid, my dad had opened racetracks, and he got my sister, Carrie, who I'd mentioned earlier, into doing press reports and taking photos. And when I was 10, I got my first camera, and I found out that I could write like a book report or a current events report about my trip to race at State College near Gettysburg in Pennsylvania. And that was my assignment. And so there was a little district newspaper in Maryland, which was District 7, called Cycling East. And a guy named Stan Miles ran it. And I sent a story into him, and he published it. He sent me a check for $32. And that was the start. I tried to race, into my college age, pro, and I was lucky enough to get to race in Europe a few times. You know what a kick that is, and that experience. And but I really never stopped, reading, writing, so on and so forth. And when I say that, I mean, like, I would take an Ernest Hemingway book with me to Paris, for a race, and devour it, in the hotel or on the plane. And I just really loved the idea of writing and reporting. And then because the Cycling East thing was working, I started sending stuff to Cycle News. And then through that, I met Fran Kuhn, who was working at Dirt Rider. And I met Super Hunky, who was the legendary dirt bike editor, Dennis Cox. And I was Dave Coombs' son. I was at the races. I was trying to help at the races, but then I'd be like, hey, can I send you some pictures I shot or a story that I shot? And it just kept evolving. And then my dad let me do the 1987 High Point National Program, the event program.
Yeah.
And he said, but you're going to have to learn how to do it yourself. You're going to have to learn how to sell the ads. You're going to have to learn how to paginate. Put the magazine together, learn how to take photos, learn how to collect bills, and it was like a soup to nuts on the job learning how to do publishing. And so for a few years I did High Point in Steel City and Loretta Lynn's, and then I decided to start this little newspaper because I was going to a lot of big races and writing things for Dirt Rider and Cycle News, but no one was doing the cool stuff like what's it like to go to, now we say Pastrana Land, or what's it like to go down Lake Havasu with Bob Hanna and Marty Tripes, and what's it like to be on a road trip with George Ellis and the Cowie rig, or whatever it was. And so I started putting things there, and it was called the Racing Paper, and then it sort of evolved into Racer X because my family's event business was Racer Productions, and still is, and it just became Racer X, and then I started sending the newspapers. I would take them to pro races with me and hand them out, or I'd send them to someone like Jeff Cernick or Phil Alderton at Honda or Troy, and they would put them in boxes and send to people, and pretty soon I was getting subscriptions from all over the country, and it just kept growing. Then I got the TV job, and suddenly I had all this momentum, and I was trying to figure out what I really wanted to do. And this is, 1996, 97. And my dad said, why don't you start a magazine? And so we didn't do bike tests. All we did was race coverage. lifestyle stuff, and road trips and, fun things. And all these things hit at once. Desktop publishing, the X Games were coming. It was just a real boom time. And I will say this, Daniel, a great deal of that was due to specifically Jeremy McGrath. Jeremy put Supercross on his back in January of 1993 and carried our sport and our sport in general, motorcycling, for a decade. And then the handoff was there to Travis and Ricky and James and so on and so forth. But doors open for a lot of people to start businesses in this industry because of the success, charisma, and just how cool Jeremy McGrath was. And
just the first, just a star, like a straight up superstar.
He was. Yeah.
Can you look at the guy? I remember being younger and first time I ever met him and just being like, couldn't even look at him. He was the king. And he, like you said, he blew this thing, blew the lid off of everything.
Another quick trivia question for you. What was Jeremy McGrath's number the night he won his first Supercross on a Kawasaki in 1990?
125.
Yeah. Just looking over your shoulder.
Hey, funny story. I was number 921 in 2000, and I don't even remember the year I switched, and I was going to ride for Ryan Clark, Team Solitaire. And he's like, you can't run a 900 number because you're American. That's usually for Europeans or Akira Narita. You got to get off the 900. And I was like, 92 is my kid number. He goes, oh, I talked to the AMA, and they gave me a couple options, and they said 125 was one of them. And I said,
done.
Jeremy's number? Jeremy's number? So I took that number, and I remember that night. I remember the first year of the peak, but I remember that KX 125. What was that year?
1990.
90. It was 90. It was a shootout at Vegas, right?
I don't think it was a shootout at that point. It was just a West round, and he was wearing high point gear.
Yeah.
Which is just weird to think how. I mean, yeah. Anyway, but so we were able to be an independent publisher. We didn't have to go through High Torque or any of the other big companies. And what was cool is, for the most part, people like Dirt Rider, Dirt Bike, they didn't really, in Cycle World, they didn't really care because we were doing such a different thing, and really allowed it to prosper. I was always afraid that it would affect our events and people wouldn't want to cover Loretta Lynn's or whatever, but
like a conflict, they would be weird about it because you guys had an upper hand being the promoters or whatever.
Yeah, and that was always a fear, and I'd seen some of that happen with Inside Motocross back in the day, but then my dad died, and he was only here for 3 issues in 1998. And I just committed at that point, okay, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And that's when all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, wait, I got to help out running this national this weekend. And all of a sudden I had 2 jobs. And so did my sister, and so did my brother. And we circled the wagons and it kept it all going. And, we're on the 23rd year of Racer X as a magazine. And, I look forward to getting up every day and working on the magazine. But now, back to what I was saying, it's not just the magazine, it's the website, it's Instagram, it's, podcast, it's videos, but I'm fortunate enough to have a bunch of really good, like-minded, talented, hardworking people who love motocross and Supercross and Arena Cross and GNCC. And
you got a lot of good people there, but then you also have JT, Weege, and Mathis that you have to deal with too.
Yeah.
It's got to be a good thing. They're enjoyable. I love them, but at the same time, you got to have to sometimes want to strangle Steve a little bit. He's told me that you've wanted to a couple times.
Well, Steve would do things that were just like, why would you touch that piece of dynamite laying there? That's not something to,
always.
Yeah, but there is, and you get it the same way. Let's say that you had an honest criticism about some component of the track, you're going to say it, and people are going to understand it because they believe you, because you're a former pro and you've been around this, and you can look at something and say, that's not a good idea. But when you don't say anything, they automatically think it's because you're a company man. You get it, I get it, Mathis get it, anyone involved in this sport, because no one has just one job. And that's one of the secrets that people don't understand about working in the motorcycle industry. You can't just do one thing. It doesn't pay well enough. You gotta do, and plus you it's almost job protection. Like, hey, wait a minute, I can take photos, I can clean goggles, I can pound in banners, I can work a TV camera, I can collect money at the front gate, I can hand out trophy. You know, when you grow up in a promotion family, you sort of learn that everyone has multiple jobs, and we kind of have that in Racer X, in MX Sports, in spades. But I think that goes for everybody in the industry.
Makes sense. You're kind of always stacking responsibilities, sometimes out of necessity, but I think a lot too out of just want. Like,
oh, yeah, exactly. You know, all the podcasts that folks do, and like, we could be on this, Daniel, for 3 hours, and I'm good with that. I mean, I start doing a list. Like yesterday, I was doing a list on riders of the year, and I realized what I was really doing. The first 5 riders of the year were all Ricky Carmichael, because it was 01, 02, 03, 04, you know, and I realized that in writing that, it became like, it was just a fun look back at like a really neat time in racing and in the magazine's history. And pretty soon I'm digging through the old issues, and oh God, I remember the Etnies ads, and I remember, you know, this, that, and yeah. You know, and in my free time, I do what I do when I work. I think about motorcycles and motorcycle races and motorcycle racers and people in the industry, and you know, we're all in this together. And I know that you could say that about something as big as the coronavirus pandemic, or something as small as, you know, the people in your phone. But motocross, I don't care what job you have, whether you're Jeremy McGrath or the guy who drove Jeremy McGrath's truck, you're friends, and you have a tie that binds, and it'll probably bind forever, because, you know, we get to be around the greatest sport in the world. We work side by side, we play side by side, and we're very like-minded people, and we all work hard. You don't find a lot of lazy people in the motorcycle industry.
You don't make it very long. You gotta be hustling at all times. It's just the pace. It's the pace of life, pace of the sport. You got to be wide open. We'll start closing this down. We're looking at 2021, getting ready to start another season. How do you approach it from a Racer X perspective of coverage? Because again, you've got a crew of people. You got Hansel out here by me. I love Hansel. Yeah, but you've got this, like, you've got your thing, and we're getting ready to go, and you've got to send everything out to do, like you said, all these different responsibilities. How do you start approaching that when we got a month to go and we're getting ready to go and start hitting these cities and hitting these races, and all of a sudden the storylines are going to go crazy? How do you approach that with a month to go with your team and everybody that you got at Racer X? Because we're going to go racing in a month.
Yeah, well, first of all, we're lucky enough, because we're small and lean, that we can make changes on the fly. And if someone says, hey, they're having Moto Fight Club in Youngstown, Ohio on Tuesday, me and A-Fred jump in the car and go to Moto Fight Club, you know, and almost like war correspondents chasing a big story or a battle or something. But on a bigger level, we've all come to know to expect the December surprise. You know, that moment when Ricky goes down in the whoops, or Dylan Ferrandis breaks his hand, and, you know, you got to be ready. This year, I didn't think that the December surprise was going to be the entire state of Arizona. So all of a sudden, we're not going to Glendale, you know, and but we make adjustments, you know, and especially in a time like now, you have to expect the unexpected. I made the comment, 2020 is the first year where Monday Night Football is literally played on every night, because it's just a rolling schedule. You know, 2020 is the first year You know, and I, you know, I know that there's some issues right now sort of being worked out about East and West,
Yep.
what's going to be what. I jokingly told someone down at Feld that it's a shame that we didn't know this 3 weeks ago, because we could have just said, hey, this year it's North and South.
Yeah.
but you know what?
Yeah, I mean Daytona's a West.
But you know what? And here's how you answer that, Daniel. What do the LA Lakers and the Boston Celtics have in common right now? They both play their home games in Orlando.
The LA Lakers of Orlando.
Every team in the NBA calls Orlando home. It's 2020 and it's 2021. And you know, whether there's, you know, no races in California or 17 races in Salt Lake City, we're going to have a race, because what makes a race is not the stadium. It's not the city. It's the 20 guys on the track at any given moment, or 22 now, I guess. You know, we're going to watch it. Those guys are going to do everything they can, and our industry is going to continue. It's going to be difficult for a little while, but you know, just as everyone learned with that baptism by fire in Salt Lake City, where you don't go anywhere for 22 days. Well, actually 24 when you have the quarantine and roll in and all that. But in hindsight, you're going to have to, not in hindsight, in the history books, 20 years from now, you're going to have to explain to someone why there were 7 races in Salt Lake City. I mean, we'll remember 2020 for what it was, but we'll move on, and the sport will continue and the sport will thrive. It's not going to be easy. There's not going to be as many people there as anyone would want. But that goes for the NFL. That goes for Major League Baseball. That goes for movie theaters, bars, shopping mall. I mean, we're literally, back to that saying, all in this together. And if we work hard and just, I think understanding of the situation around us, we can pull things off. The Fight TV pit bike race last week was hilarious. It was a lot of fun.
I just like Villapoto not winning. I just think that's hilarious. I think that's just great, because I know he don't like it.
Hey, what's funny is there was a girl there named Corey Steed, and all the girls were fast. I mean, Jordan Jarvis, those girls are so good. Jordan Jarvis was there and did not get on the podium. Obviously, she's the best girl in the world on a big bike, or at least in the U.S. But this girl, Corey Steed, I was watching her. I looked at RV and I said, dude, you're lucky she's not in the pro class. She was really good.
Dude.
So
I'm not gonna worry about Carson Brown and Willie B.
Yeah, but they were there, and they were watching too. We were all watching her like, wow, she's perfect on a pit bike.
There's no transponders on, right? We don't need no transponders. We don't need to know.
Exactly. But if we just do the little things that we're asked, seriously, wear a mask. If you're going to go out, people may not like it. People may complain. People may have a belief, but I know that if I walk into a restaurant without a mask on, they're going to ask me to leave. Most places. And I understand that, because they're told that they got to do that. And so when we go to these Supercross races and we go to, anywhere, it's going to be weird. It's going to be challenging for a while. But if that's the least we can do, then let's do it, and keep the riders safe, keep the fans around you safe. But that's how we get back up and running. And it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be something. And that's a hell of a lot better than we had, say, in April or May. So I'm looking forward to however it looks. I plan on being in Houston, and I think it's going to be an exceptional series, an exceptional season, just like last year was. Hopefully a little easier.
Hey, when the gate goes down, they race, and that's what we all love the most, right? So I'm with you. And as far as the rules, I'll dress up like an astronaut if I have to. Like, I will literally, like in ET, man. Whatever it takes. Go race on the moon. I'm there. Let's go. Like, we just got to keep it going. And to your point earlier, we're transitioning back. We'll get back to normal. We just got to get through it. But Davey, I want to thank you for coming on. I've been looking forward to this talk for a long time. And both of our trivia games were pretty fair, pretty good.
Well, let's put it this way. You definitely have me on Daniel Blair trivia.
Well, and for me, I only have a few highlights in my life, and that was one of them. So that one's not slipping this brain. So I understand.
I'll say it the same way. Between you and me, we've got one arena cross championship. That's pretty good.
But I get to put the plate on my wall. Your walls, you got a lot of other cool stuff that I don't get. Putting that one on mine. So,
yeah.
Davey, thanks again for joining me on Beyond the Track, man. It's been a fun episode, and you just said you're going to be in Houston, so you better not change your plans and send weeds. I'll see you there.
Yeah, I look forward to it, and happy holidays to you and your family, Daniel. Thanks for having me on.
You too. See you soon.